Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about something that we actually talked about last episode, and we're going to unpack that a little bit further, is being unsatisfied. What do you do when you're unsatisfied in your career and you want to make a change? Our guest here today is a career and life coach, Gorett Reis. Is somebody that I met actually through a friend of ours, a mutual friend, a good friend of mine, Alma Hanzik. And a little shout out for Alma. She is in Toronto. Her website, torontohomeshopping.com. I still think that's such an awesome URL that she was able to snag that. But she's in real estate and she's just such a wonderful woman. And we were talking and she said, oh my gosh, you have got to talk to Gorett. And so we hit it off right away and started talking about everything under the sun.
Yes, that's true.
And which is true. And we came to the conclusion that we definitely need to do a podcast talking about her expertise and her passion. And so that's why we're here today. And so Gorett, I'm excited to have you here. Welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Nicole.
It's a pleasure. And thank you for our listeners for tuning in today. You know, we're excited about you being here because this is the reason why we do this show, is to inspire you as leaders of transformation, as inspiring leaders of transformation, like, aspiring, meaning that maybe you have an idea and you haven't launched out yet, but you're thinking about it and how are you going to do it? And what support do you need to do that? Well, we've got a whole community of leaders of transformation who have gone before you and made the mistakes and had the successes and you can learn from. And so we're excited that you're here. And afterwards, make sure you go to leadersoftransformation.com. We have over 200 episodes that you can refer back to. Great resources. Each one of our guests provides tremendous value. And a lot of times even have like opportunities where you can connect with them. Gorett is going to give you an opportunity where you can actually have a conversation with her and talk through and unpack it further. So many opportunities for you to connect and learn what you need to learn in order to be that leader of transformation. So we encourage you to go to leadersoftransformation.com and get connected there. Let me give you a little bit further background on Gorett. She is a certified career and life coach as well as a speaker. She works with professionals who are looking to advance their careers or find direction. She got into coaching after a dissatisfying career in teaching and now helps others find something more fulfilling or better where they're at. And she has 3 degrees from the University of Toronto and speaks about career and life fulfillment through talks, through lunch and learns, webinars, and podcasts like this one. So Gorett, let's start off with dive right in. Okay, sure. So somebody is unfulfilled. I know you like that, right? It's like, go deep here.
That's right.
Mess around. So
I have a hard time with the surface stuff. I do.
You know what? I do too. I do too. In fact, I remember being at a workshop and we hadn't started it yet. I wasn't the speaker. I was just an attendee and they were saying, get to know people around your table. And somebody turned to me and she says, oh, I see that you're very deep. And I'm like, I haven't said anything yet. How do you know that? Apparently there's something about
right. Yeah.
We like to go deep. So let's start off with, if somebody's unfulfilled in their job, what do they do? Where do they start?
Well, I guess the first point, if they're unhappy, is to identify it. So hopefully they've identified it already. The first point, right? To really name it and say, you know what? No, this is not working. Something's not right here. So I think that's the first step. Once you identify it and name it, then it's assessing the situation. And by assessing the situation, it's a good thing. I would suggest the first step is to step away, right? And whether that is to step away and see a career life coach, whether that's to step away and just interrupt the pattern in your day-to-day life, create some time to be with you.
So you're not talking about quitting your job right off the bat. You're just
no, stepping away. No,
clear about that.
No big moves yet. No. But but step away in terms of just set some time to reflect or gain perspective. Right? So again, gain perspective with a coach or a mentor or just step away yourself and try to just create that time and that stillness for reflection. And so you can to assess the situation a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And know what you're dealing with. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go there. Is that we had this conversation about my personal experience and somebody that I know very intimately well, who was going through an dissatisfaction in a job that filtered over into relationship.
Totally. It
Our
can affect
relationship.
all
Yes.
all areas of your life. And so interestingly enough, yes, I am a career and life coach. I started as a life coach. But interestingly enough, well, most of my clients, they came to me for career related reasons, right?
Yes.
And but it doesn't stop there.
No, and if you
Usually,
don't deal with it, it's going to,
yes, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And if you're usually dissatisfied, I mean, it's not in all cases. However, there are definitely instances where, you know, you're dissatisfied in your career, you're probably dissatisfied in other areas of your life. So it spills over, or it's at the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But so just to go back to your question about where do you start? So stepping away, and I don't suggest step away forever, or like, because then that creates other problems, right? Like, oh, because it's like, well, I don't know. So I mean, just like, if you can interrupt the pattern, take an hour a day, or take a week off, or like I see a coach. Any way to gain perspective and get clear. And getting clear is a second step, I would suggest. Get clear of what you want, what are your values, what's your big why, right? And then the third, because to answer your question, is to take action. Once you're clear, once you've assessed the situation, is it taking action by bettering where you're at? Not necessarily leaving. And all the times we think, oh, we're dissatisfied, we have to leave. That's not necessarily true, right? Yeah, like there are some clients I help to actually just help get them more fulfilling role in their, because they love their organization, they just didn't love the role, or they wanted more compensation, right? Or so in other cases, it's they wanted to leave, right? It was not working for them in any respect, staying where they were at.
That's a great point, because sometimes we are dissatisfied and we can say, I hate this situation. And it's actually not all of it. It's certain things. Maybe it's a boss or colleagues that you're working with, or an environment that you're working in that's not working. I know one of my clients fired one of their employees that they said, this person, it's just not working. It's not working. And this person was actually really struggling in the role. And they were questioning the competence. And what I recognized immediately, it wasn't the incompetence. Like, it wasn't that he didn't know how to do his job. He was struggling in it and making more and more mistakes, because the pace at which he works was different than the pace of his the owners. The owners are very fast paced. They change, move they're always changing things. It's kind of one of those leaders that it's hard to keep up with, because they're making changes all the time. And they expect you, and they're high performers, and they expect you to keep up. And here's somebody that is in an analytical role of financial analysis. And so totally different personality, and work methodically, and, want to have the time to be able to do what they do well. It's, and when he wasn't able to do that, and he felt he was rushed, and why isn't it already done? Why isn't it already done? Then he started to make more and more mistakes. So anyway, when I talked to him, did an exit strategy, an exit
interview
conversation with him, I was really intentional about letting him know that it wasn't him that was wrong, and it wasn't the role that he was incapable. Like, it's not that it was the wrong role, wrong environment for him. And as soon as he found an environment in a bank, and he was doing the same thing in a different arena, a little bit slower paced, he had time.
He flourished.
He was doing amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just back to the point. It's not necessarily like, oh, one thing is bad, everything's bad, right? Identify the areas. Is it the boss? Is it your organization? Is it the work culture? Is it so? It could be different things. Is it that you're feeling undervalued because you're not getting paid enough? Like, what is it? Or is it all of those things? And is it really a toxic environment? So it's things to really get clear about. So yes, definitely when I say step away, I don't necessarily like leave your job, but mean step away as in take enough time to be without distraction, see a coach or whatever, and gain perspective.
Yes. Gaining perspective. Yes. Now, if somebody is feeling undervalued in their job, and they love their job, they even love the arena, but maybe they're not feeling like they're actually being valued, not being paid enough, right, in their role, how do they have that conversation? How do they bridge that conversation to say, hey, you know what, I would like this exchange to be a little bit different. I want to be compensated more for that. Do you get into that with your clients?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. And it's different for every personality though. And so it's a really individualized, customary, because I would take in consideration the person's personality, and like for instance, not everybody's like, hey, direct. I'm somebody who I don't mind going to the person, right, and saying, hey, I'm feeling, but for some people it's not their communication style, so we have to consider communication styles as well.
Sure.
So depends on whoever this personality is. The first step is maybe like starting out with an email saying, I'd love to meet, whatever, I would like to discuss my role or whatever. Again, depends on the situation. And then, having an honest kind of feedback and saying, like using I feel statements, right? Like I'm feeling, as opposed to saying, because once you're saying you're not paying me enough and everything else, and you make it a blank statement like that, then most often than not, people are going to be on the defensive and put the back up, right? So if you come from a place where you're being constructive in terms of what you have to say, but also looking up for yourself and advocating for yourself. Again, there's many different, variables about this situation, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think that even before that, talk about what happens inside, that the person needs to get to that point where they're even ready to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that.
And that's a great point, because when you asked me that, I'm like, okay, we'll just talk about the very end steps. However, there's a lot to go into that, because it's not that easy for even people to write that email or even to see the person, right? Because there's oftentimes their own value or worth issue, right? Yes. And so they know intellectually that they are not getting paid enough and they're feeling undervalued, but themselves are having an issue of asking for more. Yes. Right? Yes. So absolutely, there's a lot of work behind the scenes and before those two steps, right? Of getting to a place where you feel that you are worth it and that you can ask for it. Yeah.
So how do you, just give us some tips for our listeners? Obviously, you're going to need to unpack that. It is customized for who you're dealing with. But give our listeners some tips in terms of, and I think this actually comes back to even the fulfillment in our job, is, do we feel worthy of being in a position of doing what we love? Do we even feel that we're capable? So there's the competence, there's the worthiness conversation, all of that. Can you talk a little bit and give us some tips for our listeners on how they can unpack that?
Well, I'm going to try to think of a client story, perhaps, because that's best. Because again, it's different per individual. So, yeah. Well, okay. So I'm just going to think about this one. I'm trying to think through my clients. But this one client, who definitely, one of her issues was that she had a recurring negative pattern at work. Right? She didn't understand why she was continuously, she felt mistreated by her managers, right? And coworkers, but mainly managers. And she completely felt undervalued. And in that situation, we unpacked quite a few things. However, one is that at some point, there was a defining moment when she was about 15 or 16 years old, where she was very confident up to that point. She was very confident, but there was something that happened, right, that shifted, and she just lost the confidence and she gave her power away. And when we shone some, like what I'm trying to say, shed some light on the situation, and we figured out, that was really a pivotal time. And then thereafter, like she's now in her 40s, right? And thereafter, it's just been a continual repeated behavior where she's not getting the respect or, the value that she feels that she should. So there's that, like, and so now she's taking back the power, and so to speak, and there's many different ways how she did it. Again, there's a lot of steps that went along that I process, and I can't really go into it because of confidentiality reasons. But I'm trying to be as vague and general as possible. And so she started shifting and advocating for herself more, creating more boundaries. So creating more boundaries, again, small shifts, small, like incremental, not necessarily like overnight. She just, she was just, it takes time, especially if you got into a habit of being a certain way. It takes time to usually get out of that way of being. And then, so there was other things where she also realized that her perfectionistic standards were also getting in the way of how she perceived others and how she was perhaps influencing the dynamic as well. So like it was not just maybe others, maybe not just others, but that how her unrelenting standards were affecting the dynamic.
Well, so what I heard you say is that number one, it's looking back to see where does this stem from, and I do believe that there's that moment, like she said, she gave her power away, and then she's been living that out. That position, she's been living that out for the following years. I believe that there's like this primary lie that we buy into at some point, maybe in our childhood, or you have one of those moments where you do something happens and it's like we create belief systems about who we are in that moment, and they are the driving force for the rest of our life. And so I hear that it's like we got to figure out what that is.
The core beliefs.
We can blame other people and say, they're not treating me, well, or they're not valuing me, they're not paying me enough. But it comes back to, and this is where the 100% we're 100% responsible, mean that we can take responsibility, having the ability to respond, and to say, where did I contribute to that? And so I love that distinction. So for looking at that and then looking at how did I contribute to, because I do believe that we teach people how to treat us.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's our intention. Sometimes our intention of why we do things is misinterpreted. I know that's happened for me. It's misinterpreted by the person based on their filter. So the boss who says, well, I thought you were working overtime because you just worth it. You or weren't asking for a raise because you didn't, psychologically they didn't think that you were worth it. And you may have been doing it supposedly for a different reason. But it's as Tony Robbins says, communication is the response we get. So, how do we want people to treat us? And we need to make sure that our communication is clear in order for that to happen. So really good distinction. And that's where the coaching comes in. It's not so much yet, you can help people, I'm sure, to find new paths and
which I do. Those tangibles happen. It's just that some other stuff goes on along the way.
Yes. This is where the life coaching comes in.
That's right. That's right. Hence career and life coaching. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So, the career is where we spend so much of our time. So what do you find are the most, and I know there's of course confidentiality, and I think the story that you just shared, and I appreciate you sharing that, is so common to so many people where they can relate to that. What are some of the things that you notice in working with clients that are some of the common roadblocks to satisfaction in careers? Like, what do people
so I'm going to answer your question for sure, because I already have I already have the answer, I believe, because I've really took a lot of time to think about it. Actually, it's not just like, I'm thinking about it right off the top of my head. Actually, I've taken a lot of time to think about what you just said, the common roadblocks. However, just quickly, just because I also wanted to talk about two things you brought up, right? First, you mentioned responsibility, and that was a big thing that we talked about, actually, was what's her part, what's not her part, what's her business, what's not her business. And that was actually a really defining moment in our coaching, was when she started taking more responsibility. Right. So that was a great point, the responsibility piece. Actually, I wrote a blog post at one point about responsibility as well, a few months ago. Anyway, and then the other point that you mentioned is definitely you teach people how to treat you. And once you really learn that or accept that and actually start doing that and creating those boundaries or shifting those dynamics, right? Those embedded, entrenched dynamics that have been negative in the past. Once you slowly do it, you can start with your family. It doesn't necessarily have to be with co-workers or boss. Once you start that, then it can start spilling out in other areas and other relationships, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So anyway, so common roadblocks. I just wanted to address that because it was like two good points that you mentioned.
All right. Well, we're back with Gorett Reis. We had a little technical glitch here, and she was right in the middle of talking about the roadblocks to satisfaction in your job. So, Gorett, you want to pick it up there?
Okay, no problem, Nicole. So, in terms of roadblocks, what I found with my clients, back to that story for a second, where I'm talking about her perfectionistic standards. I find that for a lot of my clients, those perfectionistic standards get in the way of their satisfaction because it's never good enough, right? So definitely, if something's never good enough, how are you ever satisfied? Another thing that I've noticed with my clients, a lot of them, is the whole people-pleasing aspect in terms of putting other people's needs before your own. So saying yes perhaps when you didn't want to say yes, but you just feel like, okay, you want to be liked or whatever, or for whatever reason, or you feel like, oh, this is just me, I want to be, giving, and then just adds up, right? And so definitely I see that because that can contribute to burnout. Another thing that can contribute to burnout is the whole overachieving, constantly overachieving, like just overachieving, overfunctioning, and that also leads to burnout, which can also contribute to health issues, right? So that can be a source of dissatisfaction too, when it's actually now, people get strokes or whatever, right, for high stress, right? And there's other things like depression, diabetes, sleep problems. So when it starts affecting your health, that can also affect your satisfaction, of course, right? And another thing that I find is a lack of joy. If they don't have a lack of joy in their career, and if they don't have it in their lives outside of their career, then that's definitely a source of dissatisfaction, and a lack of contribution or fulfillment that way of contributing and giving back some way. And if you're not doing that, if you don't feel like you're doing that in your role, and you're not doing that outside of your role, that could also be a source of dissatisfaction. So those are some of the roadblocks off the top of my head that I feel that are in between of the person and their satisfaction.
Well, and I think nowadays we're so talk about high achieving, people are trying to do more, accomplish more. It's like, even if you ask people, how are you doing right now? And they're like, or how's your day? And like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. They're wearing busy with a badge of, as a badge of honor. And that doesn't necessarily equate to satisfaction. I mean, there's a reason why I think it's 85% now I heard as high as 85% that are disengaged or unsatisfied in their job. That's a really high statistic of people and this is where we're spending the most of our time throughout our lifetime, and of course, throughout our week. And to not be enjoying what we're doing. And sometimes we look at the thing and say, I need to change the thing that I'm doing, when it might be that we actually need to change our approach to what it is we're doing. Or maybe there's some other areas. Like I know that when I study the human needs psychology and from Tony Robbins, and he talks about the primary needs that we have, like the certainty and the variety. I think variety is a big one, right? If we don't have variety, we don't have the fulfillment, we don't have that contribution, then how can we possibly, and you could be in a great position. How many people do we know that are successful by most people's standards, have the nice house, have the family, have all these things, but they're unsatisfied even in that position? And you look at them and saying, how is that possible? But some of these things, the people pleasing, the overachieving, the perfectionism comes in and affects that. And it doesn't matter how good it is, but they're not going to be, satisfied in that. So very, very true.
Yeah. So they're continuously looking for the external sources of happiness as opposed to seeing it and seeking it within.
Yes. Yeah. And then you meet somebody that's, no disrespect to this, I'm just going to pick this vocation, but like somebody who drives a garbage truck and is having the time of their life, and they just have a different perspective
Yeah. Or
on
they're very passionate about doing that and cleaning up. Yeah.
cleaning up
Right.
their
So yeah, and the environment and stuff like that. So, but just a little bit, I just also want to add that sometimes dissatisfaction comes from systemic factors too, right?
Talk about
So
that.
for some corporations, right? If again, I'm not picking one in particular, but like if they're just trying to save a buck and then they're just trying to download roles, taking away roles, right? So they don't have to pay people, but then adding all the responsibilities. So that whole download effect, that right there. So sometimes it's not just an individual thing I just wanted to mention. Sometimes it's a systemic thing that's happening. And then how do you respond to it, right?
Yes.
How do you respond to those factors that are happening? And then there's other factors, right? Well, discrimination is a huge source of dissatisfaction, right? And that's another systemic thing, right? So something I just want to decipher between individual versus systemic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because we're looking at creating transformation in this space of careers, and the thing that people are spending most of their time doing, how do they put themselves in a position where they love what they do, they're having fun, they're excited to get up in the morning. What does it take to do that? And I know that's a big part, because you had a dissatisfying job, being a teacher, doing something you didn't enjoy, and now being in a place where you get excited and you love what you do.
Yes,
it's just totally different. And I really believe that that we get to do that. We get to have that enjoyable life. It's not like, okay, well, this is the way it's supposed to be, just because I got to go and take care of my family and provide for them. So now talking about leaving, when is it where that, what, I've looked at all these different factors and I weighed it out and I know it's time that I got to go? Like, when is that point when they know that it's time to move on?
Well, I mean, again, it's an individual, but for me, I think that you mentioned a quote when we first spoke and before the recording of this, a quote by Anais Nin, right? And that's one of my favorite quotes, and it's actually on my website. It's on my website because to me, it really captures the point of where I actually took the plunge to change, right? And for me, the pain to stay the same was more painful than the risk it took to blossom, right? So for me, I guess it's where does that tipping point happen, right? Where if you have uncovered all those stones, like, you've turned all over the stones, and it's really that bad, and you're not looking forward to it, but not just like one day or 2 days, but chronically not looking for, and then perhaps it's time to move on then, right? But it's that pain, right? It's what is it more than, is it being in the status quo the same, or in your job, is it less pain or more pain to move on? Yeah.
So when people will work with you, you help them to unpack, identify, become self-aware, get to know where they're at, what's causing the dissatisfaction, and then you help maneuver them. Do you also help them to create that new career if they're going into something new? And then how do they actually connect within that industry? It might be a different industry.
Well, yeah, there's definitely the background work that we just spoke about, but definitely the tangible steps of, I do look at resumes, although I do not write them. I will provide feedback, right? But depending on the writing of the resume, I will suggest the person to actually seek out, and I can refer them to a professional certified resume writer, and different things. So there's different tangible things, and talk about LinkedIn and steps of networking and how to go about taking steps to work in that industry. So yeah, there's definitely, or to contact even, to expose yourself around, so definitely steps about all that. But yeah, so that usually comes, well, depends on the package that they get, actually. But yeah, definitely those are the tangible things that.
Resumes. You talk about resumes. I've seen a lot of resumes that don't differentiate the person at all. I always see it as it's a sales tool. bottom line. It's like you're now selling yourself. And so does that sell your value proposition to that company in terms of what do you bring? And you're right. A lot of times, some of them, they need to be rewritten or tweaked, and doesn't mean you need to do it, but in order. It's like, I look at it as like there's 300 resumes that are going to, if let's say 300 people apply for this same job.
Yeah. Exactly.
How are you going to stand out?
That's right.
In that.
That's right.
So,
and with some industries, it's actually not people anymore. So they have programs to read certain words, right?
Just the keywords.
Yeah. And just a tip for people who are going in like, tech field and other fields, but yeah, like PDFs, those programs do not read PDFs. So
yes.
Yeah.
So give us some practical tips in terms of job seeking now. So I think we can finish off there, and then direct people to your website, they can connect with you. But from job seeking tips for people that are maybe out of a job right now and saying, I know that I need to do something else. I've identified what that is.
Okay. So once they identify, right? Because I'm more of the inside out approach. I'm not saying, because I don't really like to take the approach of like, this is a hot market right now. Why don't you try this? Right. So that's not
doing whatever. Yeah.
Right. I heard, this industry, So as long as they know and they figure it out, because some clients have moved on to being entrepreneurs, to be honest with you. So they've realized it's not for them to be employed actually. So just to make that note. But yeah, just some practical steps. I mean, definitely, I would say start, of course, if you want to like do a whole like macro search or whatever, but think about the places you actually want to work at, you think you would like to work at, right? Start connecting with people on LinkedIn, asking who work there, right? And see if they have any functions, see if they, any groups that, that they hang out in, but also just asking about the culture, right? Getting a sense of it and really, but just getting out there. And I think the number one tip for job searching is, because it's really rare, it happens, but it's still really rare to get it through cold resume or cold calling, right? So relationships, I would have to underscore the whole idea of just who do you know, put it out there saying, this is what I'm looking for, but have a criteria, right? Like have a criteria of like, if nothing's worked for you in the past, then what is it that you want from getting clear and making sure you find something that, and apply to something that speaks to you and that meets your criteria, but also, like I said, just go out there, develop those relationships in order to do so.
I love that about the criteria, because I was just imagining, you've got your resume. This is what you are capable of doing. And it does say up there the objective and so forth, the type of overall, the type of environment or what you're looking to do. But then here, if you have your criteria, and maybe that'd be a great thing for job seekers and people even considering like that they have a job and they're looking to the next transition, or people that are actually actively looking right now, is to come up with, like you said, that criteria of maybe what would be some of those headings they might look. I know for environment would be one, right? Culture would be another, time, how much time, is required.
Oh, absolutely.
Travel, all those things.
Huge. Yeah.
So if they actually have that criteria and sit down and say, okay, here's my one sheet on the criteria.
Yep.
To be able to share.
And what are your non-negotiables in that criteria?
Yes.
Right? So that's another thing to think about, right? So what are you
not willing to tolerate?
Exactly. What are you willing to negotiate and not, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. And then again, I don't want to go too much into my process, but definitely there are exercises that I do with clients in order for them to understand their criteria even, right? To go to that place where it's coming really deeply from the inside out. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So speaking of your process, so people can go to GorettReis.com. I'll spell that out. GorettReis.com. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. So for those of you that are driving, that are going, what was that? We'll make sure. So leadersoftransformation.com. All you need to do is type into the keyword search. You can type in Gorett, Gorett, and her show notes will come up and the link will come up so that you can access her website. So what can they find there when they go to your website?
Well, they're just going to find like who I serve, right? And some common themes of the people who I serve. They're going to find a little bit about me, my story, and my education, other things. And and then blog posts. I mean, I have blog posts. I do one. I try to do one for every month, right? So there are blog posts. There's so different things. So go there and check it out. But also, I wanted to say too that if anybody is thinking about career or life coaching or both, because it's very interwoven, especially my work is very interwoven. Definitely, contact me through my website, or info@gorettreis.com, and you said you're going to have the link, and set up a get acquainted call. So that's just complimentary. That's just to see if I can help you, to see if it's a good fit, and it's just to see where you're at, and we'll go from there. Because just to let people know that most of my coaching is actually over video conferencing like this or phone. So majority of it's through phone. So the person could be anywhere actually. So it doesn't have to be, it's like coaching without borders. It's really an international thing because there's many reasons why not many, there's a few reasons why I actually switched. I used to be in person, but now it's over the phone mainly. And other than 2 packages, I do offer some in-person time, but that's local.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your passion and also your patience with some of the technical glitches that we've experienced. I hope for our listeners that you got some really great value out of what Gorett has shared on a life coaching standpoint and also career coaching perspective. And what I encourage all of our leaders of transformation to do at the end of every conversation, I always say, take action. Take something. If you're listening, odds are if you clicked on this and are listening to this, you're in a position where you want to transition into something else, whether you're in a business and you want to make some changes in that. This applies to you as well. It's like if you're dissatisfied in your life and you want to have more fun, you want to be more fulfilled, you want to do something that you feel like you're contributing and making the impact that you want to make, then I encourage you to take action on something that, as I said, that we've talked about here. And go to Gorett's website, check out what she's about. You can learn more about her. We'll also make sure that the link to her social media is there so you can find her on social media and follow her and read her blogs and so forth. So there's a lot of really great information out there. And again, Gorett, we're really grateful to have you here today. And and for our listeners, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon. In the meantime, let us know your stories. Let us know how this has impacted you. If you have questions, unanswered questions, things that we didn't address, then please reach out to us and we'd be happy to support you. And I'm happy to send those on to Gorett and so she can respond as well. So we want to make sure that we're here to support you along your journey. And again,
just want to say thank you so much too. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so again, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation. Until then, have a great day.